Hello, everybody. This is a panel sponsored by WIP Media. You can see their logo down there in the corner. And we're going to be answering a question that all of us ask in our private moments, except we're going to be doing publicly. And that question is what we would each do if we were running a given company. God knows we all say that, man, if I was running Netflix, I would boom. Well, guess what? We're going to answer that question. And we're going to introduce some of our players real quickly here, starting over at my left. Mike Bloxham, why don't you tell us who you are and what do you do quickly?
Sure. Executive Vice President at Magid, research and consulting for the media landscape right across the ecosystem. Been doing that for an embarrassingly long period of time. Thank you.
And you are talking to us from where?
I am talking to you from the delights of the Hudson Valley, about 100 miles north of New York City.
Very good. And Hudson Valley is out of focus, and that does not have anything to do with the gin tasting you did last week, right?
No, it's probably to do with smoke drifting across from the west of the country. We are actually getting smoke from Oregon in the Hudson Valley these days.
Lord Almighty. All right, Alan Wolk, you're over to my right. Who are you? What do you do?
Okay, my name is Alan Wolk. I am the co-founder and lead analyst at TV Rev. We are a media analyst firm. We work with a range of companies in the industry, from MVPDs, networks, and streaming apps to ad tech companies and startups and all that. I do a lot of writing and speaking. I have a book about the industry called Over the Top: How the Internet is Slowly but Surely Changing the Television Industry. And I am speaking to you from beautiful Millburn, New Jersey, home of the Short Hills Mall.
Oh, dear Lord in heaven. Thank you, sir. Sherry Brennan, you're in the center of my screen. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you?
I'm the center of my own universe. That's so great. I am the EVP and general manager of the WIP Media Exchange, which is a brand new platform for buyers and sellers of video content to find each other and learn about content and figure out where, if you're a content owner, where you should license your content, and if you're a buyer, what content you should buy. We are in beta mode right now. We will be going commercial in the winter, and I have about a 30-something year history in the pay television business, so lots of experience, and I've actually relied on the expertise of all three of these guys here, actually all four if I count you, Rick. So this is quite a great group to have assembled for this conversation. I really wish I could just listen to what you guys all have to say.
Well, it's being recorded, so you can listen later. And where are you, Sherry?
Oh, I'm in Los Angeles, California.
Very good. And finally, Colin Dixon. Who are you? Where are you? And what do you do?
Founder and chief analyst at Endscreen Media. I've been an analyst in this business for a very long time. Let's see. I'm here in sleepy Sunnyvale, California, just outside San Francisco and San Jose.
There you go. And I'm Rick Howe, and I'm on my little farm in Maryland, and I've been in the industry since I was climbing poles for the predecessor of Time Warner Cable in 1973.
Oh,
so
God.
Pretty much if anybody's completely screwed up the television business, I'm one of those people who is responsible for it. Okay, speaking of screwing up the television business, the question that we have on the table is, what would you do if you ran? And we're going to start off, and I'm going to ask, let's see, who really was digging into Apple TV Plus? I'm going to start with Alan, and
Yes.
We're going to go around, and we're going to say, what would you do, Alan Wolk, if you ran Apple TV Plus?
Well, the first thing I would do if I ran Apple TV Plus was buy some more programming. That is their number one problem. I mean, you see it right now. They've got this great show, Ted Lasso, which if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. It's a wonderful show.
It's one of Sherry's favorites, by the way. I have to say that.
But you watch it, and then it's like, okay, and now what? And while they do have it on, they've been releasing this season sort of on a weekly basis. Still, you get to the end of it and it's like, okay, why am I paying them money? Now, for a long time, Apple was not charged, they kept giving it to you for free. You were supposed to get it for 6 months, but then they kept extending it. But now they're charging you that $5. And while I think a lot of people are just going to be like, okay, well, it's just $5, not worth my while. But just as many or not, but overall, they have such a good brand name and all that, and they do have a lot of decent, the shows they have are good. They just don't have anything else there. It really looks like I've described it as looking like one of those boutiques in Soho where you walk in and there's 6 artfully arranged linen blouses hanging from a single rack, and there's nothing else in the store, and you're like, well, what? So that is what I would do if I ran them. And I think that, there's a number of other companies. They have about $250 billion in cash reserves. So they could pretty much buy anybody that they wanted. I would think Viacom would be a good choice for them. It has a lot of very popular content. It's well regarded and all that. So that's if I had to pick somebody for them to buy.
Okay, well, now speaking of Viacom, we did just celebrate the 40th anniversary of MTV. If anybody watched that show, it was great fun. If you could find it, that was done for Biography Channel some time ago. And they pointed out that pretty much the only video MTV had when they launched was Video Killed the Radio Star. They ran that for about a week. So, you don't actually have to have a lot of content, do you? Mike Bloxham, what should Apple TV be doing?
Great question. By the way, I love the premise for this panel, the whole, what would you do? I like Alan's analogy, actually, for the volume of content with retail. And it made me think that actually the Apple stores are a bit like that. They have way more space than technically a retailer needs to stock and to do all that kind of stuff, but it's part of an experience. And it works for them in retail for sure. But yeah, there's a different set of dynamics around the amount and type of content that you actually have on a streaming platform, because it isn't just about volume of content. It's keeping constant the amount of content that I actually want to watch, which isn't just about content that I like. It's also content that I haven't seen before. I mean, the point about Ted Lasso is well made. You've been desperate for the second season of that for a long time because it's such an exquisitely good show, but one exquisitely good show doesn't make a service. But I think if you're going to think about what you'd do if you were running Apple TV, Apple TV Plus, you've got to consider what is the importance of video to the enterprise as a whole, to the mothership. Because unlike Netflix, pretty much all of the newer entrants into the space are part of something much bigger. And you're going to say, how does Apple TV Plus serve the larger agenda of Apple? The obvious analogy is Amazon. It helps get people onto the platform, gets them into Prime, and it helps feed information in and marketing opportunities in for the retail side of the business. What's the equivalent for Apple, and what's the agenda? Because that then determines just how much you're going to invest in more content, more marketing, improving the service, dealing with the user experience, and making that everything that it can be, and everything that is exemplary of Apple, which I think is really important, and it's not quite there yet. But it all does come back to that central question. For a long time, I think, most of us in the business have really felt that Apple was kind of dabbling in TV. It was kind of a sideline indulgence, not a serious commitment. They're obviously way more committed than they were, but I don't think it's clear still just how much importance they place upon video as an organization. Clearly, the people within that unit are very committed, and they are buying more content. They're shopping pretty heavily around at Sundance and the other festivals. They're doing some pretty big deals. And I think we're going to see quite a lot more content probably on the platform in the fall. And it's quality stuff if you believe the trades. But what I would do, frankly, and building off of what Alan was saying, if I was Apple TV Plus and had the organizational commitment to it, I'd actually look seriously at going and buying Netflix. They could actually pull that off. And if they really wanted to go down and have a significant presence in video, including a growing international presence, then I would double down, go bold and say, fine, let's go buy Netflix, because somebody's going to buy Netflix at some point. And we'll talk about my view on how Netflix should respond to that when we get on to that particular subject. But that's my starting thought.
All right. Sherry, you're next as the Ted Lasso fan in the room. Actually, there are other Ted Lasso fans. But what would you do if you ran Apple TV Plus?
So I agree with what Alan and Mike have said largely, that their content offering is disappointing, and if that's really where they want to, make sort of a stand, they ought to do better there. I think it's like a boutique with 3 exquisite linen blouses and 4 pairs of ripped up used jeans. Like, it's like some stuff's great, some stuff's terrible. And I realize that beauty's in the eye of the beholder when it comes to content. So what works for me probably doesn't work for everybody else. But in any event, what I would do differently is I would make the price 0. I don't think they have enough content to justify charging anything at all. I think they should stop doing the weekly releases because that irritates people. For better or for worse, we've become accustomed on the internet to having the full season available right away. And I think it is disappointing to consumers when they don't have that. But I would feel a lot better about that if I wasn't paying $5 a month. So I would make the price 0. I would use it. I believe their core competency is in UI and in devices and in functionality, and that they should triple down on that in the video space. So they could, for example, make it much easier to watch content offline. They could make deals with services to provide that kind of functionality to people when they're flying on airplanes. Since we all know airplane Wi-Fi is terrible, and it's hard to watch video that isn't already on your device when you're on a plane. They could double down that way. They could double down on TVs if they wanted to. I realize there's no margin in TVs, but as a platform for selling other stuff that they want people to buy, I think that might be a good way to go. I love the idea of them buying Netflix. I hadn't thought of that. I had thought of, like, why weren't they buying MGM? Why did they let Amazon snap that up? Like, that seems like, and for all we know, they were bidding and they just lost the bidding war. I don't know. So there you go. I'll stop.
Okay. Colin, what would you do if you ran Apple TV Plus?
Thanks, Rick. Make me last.
No,
so that
I'm
all the good ideas are taken. No. So I broadly, the content issue, the quantity of content is not sufficient. That's absolutely true. Although I will say what they are producing is pretty good quality. So I've watched several different shows. Ted Lasso, definitely the best one of the bunch in my mind. But the Amazing Stories and Emily, these are all good shows, really enjoyable shows. I think Apple has a broader problem, and I think that they really need to be giving people reasons to come into Apple TV, the app, and they really haven't done that yet. So what I would be doing if I were them is I would be investing in some free content. They need a fast. They need something in Apple TV where people can just come in and casually watch and hang out there, and then transition to Apple TV Plus if they want to watch some quality content, or then vector off into Netflix or wherever it is they want to go. But right now, there is no compelling reason whatsoever to use an Apple TV app on a different device. And I mean, you can even watch. I mean, you don't even need. The only reason to go in there is Apple TV Plus, and it's not enough. So they need to make it more of a destination. Apple TV, the box, would benefit from that. Apple TV, the app, would benefit. Their partners would benefit, and Apple TV Plus would benefit. So that's what I would do.
Okay, I'll do one quickie, and then we're going to go on to Netflix. My simple advice to Apple is to buy Roku, because I think the hardware business is in their DNA. I think the UI business is in their DNA. They know how to distribute it. They know how to run it. And rather than investing in content, I think they ought to be a smart aggregator, which, if done right, is what Roku could do, but they're a little further down our list. But that's mine. Okay, that's a quickie. All right, well, we talked about Netflix. What should Netflix do if they're approached by Apple for a purchase? See, where do we start first the last time? Sherry, I'm going to go to you first on, sorry about this, going to you first. On Netflix, what if you ran Netflix? What would you do besides count money and wish that it was green?
Well, they're counting money on the way in, but they're also counting it on the way out, right? Their margins are thin. So I would look at that and try to improve my bottom line. I would also stop canceling shows that people love after 1 or 2 seasons. I think that is fatal, honestly. And I think there's a lot of competition for eyeballs. And even though they've been in the catbird seat for a long time, that's starting to probably erode. And, you know, if you irritate people enough, they go away, and they go away mad, and they don't come back. So I think they still have a long runway before that's a big problem. But I do think with all the competition, they're not doing themselves any favors by becoming known as a place where you shouldn't get too attached. It's like, and I don't know why they do that. You know, it could be that they do that because their talent deals are such that the talent wants to stop after 1 or 2 seasons. It could be that they are looking at the margins and seeing that once they've got a show that is a hit, the talent cost goes way up. So then, you know, they need to have more viewing or more subscriptions to justify it. I don't know. It's always been my thought that what they considered to be a successful show wouldn't necessarily fail to be canceled on regular TV network. So, you know, they may be making decisions that make sense in the linear business, but that disappoint people in the internet focused business. So that's my 2 cents for Netflix.
All right, Colin, what about you on Netflix?
So it's really hard to criticize a management team that has built a business that's 200 million subscribers in 10 years. They've just done a fabulous job. And the way they've gotten there is by laser focus on basically HBO. That is what they set out to do. And I think they're being pretty successful at out HBOing HBO. However, I think companies that are in their situation that have gotten that big are usually developing new business lines to earn additional revenue. And they're really not doing that. The game service they announced is really focused on building the value of the subscription service, the subscription video service, not in building a valuable games service.
Right.
Now it could evolve towards that over time, but it's certainly not going to be that anytime soon. The retail store, again, that's just to support the branded franchises that they've developed inside of Netflix. So what would I do? I would go much more aggressively into licensing. So they have a massive library now. They have a lot of that stuff is pretty old, and he's probably sat quiescent in the library because everybody that wanted to see it has seen it, that's a Netflix member. So I would license. I would start licensing that stuff to other services, even to traditional TV. I think that could be a very interesting business for them and help build. You know, there's been a lot of speculation also about them producing linear channels. I think there's an opportunity for them to use that content and build and enter, join the fasts and do a couple of fast channels. I think Viacom CBS is doing an extremely effective job at using Pluto TV to promote its new shows, particularly the reboots like, the one on The Hills, for example, and Picard. They're using it in an extremely effective way, and I think Netflix could do the same. And I think it would help attract new subscribers and help continue to build the business in the way that they want it. So those are a couple of ideas that I might look at. But boy, hard to criticize that management team.
The linear channel thing is interesting. Someone wrote, I don't know who did it, that children's programming is one of the biggest categories on Netflix. And when you look at the library they could easily put together a channel, linear or even linear with on-demand, however you want to do it, of just their kids programming, and just, you know, make some more money, build the brand, and get more people involved in it. So, Mike Bloxham, what would you do if you ran Netflix?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is inevitably going to be, well, more of the same, because to Colin's point, they have done a bang up job. They've been the market maker. You can't really fault what they've done. You can just kind of maybe pick around the edges and say, well, they could have done that or done that sooner. And I'm really glad I'm going to disagree with somebody on this, actually, because there's nothing worse than when we all agree it's all a bit kumbaya. I think the way they've leaned into releasing shows on a weekly cadence, although when they did it with the Great British Baking Show, I tore my hair out and got very annoyed. I think it's actually a stroke of genius. And there are some shows, which there aren't many right now. I think we're going to see more in the future, where their format, their structure works best when it's actually released on a weekly cadence. There's actually one on BritBox that I watch as a Brit. Colin, you'll know this, Gardener's World, because it's pegged in where are you in the growing season that week? What are you going to do? That works perfectly. Not all of them work that well. But
that is so British. So British, Mike.
It's amazing how the pandemic has benefited Gardener's World in the States. It's incredible. It's therapy programming. Anyway, I think it also gets people leaning in, and you're getting a different kind of appointment viewing with that kind of cadence of a release for the right kinds of shows. And that establishes different types of habits, keeps people with services, gets them using it in a different way beyond binging and so on. But again, building on what Colin was saying about, they've out HBO'd HBO. They've got to make sure that they're the ones to out Netflix. And I think that's the essence of their big challenge. The market's changed. Because in some ways, if you really want to simplify it, Netflix it's kind of a one-trick pony or a one-trick unicorn in deference to their success. It is about that simple, compelling, irresistible proposition where you can watch the content you really want to watch when you want on pretty much any platform. We all know that mantra. It's
without ads, by the way.
Indeed, it's the promise of interactivity, and they've made it real in the concept of television. But how do they continue to be the dominant force in the market, which they undoubtedly are right now and probably will be for some time? And that's where I go to this notion of, if Apple did pop up and say, hey, let's talk about a transaction. If I was running it, I would want to have a serious and earnest conversation about that. I think I would be looking not for an exit, partial exit, sure. There's a capital event to be had right now on pretty much whatever terms Netflix wants to dictate, because they're the belle of the ball and they're a huge asset, and everybody believes that there is way more promise going forward. But if they were to become a part and a powerful part of something bigger, where they still manage to not be subservient to a bigger company, but they're still calling the shots to a very large extent in their own destiny. But they then are able to not just succeed in terms of revenue per quarter for Wall Street, subscriber numbers and so forth, all the streaming media metrics of success, but they can also feed a larger beast and help that larger beast achieve other unrelated business objectives through the data that you get, the assets, the subscriber base that you have within a majorly successful streaming service. I think it adds another dimension, and it gives them another kind of plethora or foundation of opportunities that they can use to build the streaming service. But I think there are fewer and fewer proportionately streaming services which stand alone. I don't believe it's actually the future. It may be the future for one or two, but I think that it's a tougher future than it would be if they become part of something bigger. But as I say, right now, they can pretty much name the price and they can pretty much name their terms. And it's something I would really want my board to be looking at very, very closely if I was running Netflix. I'd also buy a castle in Scotland, by the way, because I'd be getting paid enough to do that.
I wonder if their deals have any prohibitions about who they can sell to. Their content deals.
Their content deals. Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know. Alan Wolk, what would you do, bud, if you ran Netflix?
Okay, well, I have a slightly different opinion. I think they're in kind of a dicey situation right now, especially compared to Disco, Warner, and the Disney empire. So for a long time, people come and they watch Netflix because there was one or two shows that they really liked. And then there was this whole mass of reruns that you could watch. And that was the big appeal, is that you could sit there and watch episode after episode of Friends or Family Guy or American Dad, whatever it was. And all that stuff is going away. And then to Sherry's point, they have these hit series. and they cancel them after 1 or 2 seasons where they have fans. Now, it's funny, Sherry, the theory that I have heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, is that they make the decision that, okay, we're not getting any additional subscribers from doing a 3rd season of this series, so why are we wasting the money? And then part of that too is that there are all sorts of back end deals with the talent that if they cancel it, they don't have to pay. Because it doesn't go into syndication that way.
Right, but those are 2 penny wise and pound foolish decisions, right?
100%. And then, which is even stupider, they don't have like all of the series that, all of these things like, Modern Family that have 300 episodes that you can just sit there and say, I want to watch anything. They don't have that anymore, and they're not creating their own. Now, they are creating a whole lot of original programming, and the truth is most of it sucks. And and you see a bunch of articles that are coming out from people not in our end of the industry, but from people who are sort of more in the culture end, saying like, why does so much on Netflix suck? And people are going, okay, and they don't have sports, right? So if I'm figuring out where to spend my money, well, they don't have news or sports, I should say. So Disco Warner has news, they have CNN. Disney has sports, it has ESPN. They both have, a bit of the other two. So Netflix is in this weird position of like, why am I doing this? Plus, yes, they were trying to HBO, but so is pretty much everybody else except for Discovery Plus and Disney Plus. It's really hard to understand, what the difference is between the content, any of these streaming services. It's all really good, but it's all of that HBO style. So they don't have that anymore. And then the final thing they have that, there's a couple of shows they release weekly, but most of it is all at once. And that makes marketing it really tough. They have to market it like a movie because it's there and it's gone. And it used to work for them when there was, when they had 5 original series, there'd be a lot of press buzz around the new season of Orange is the New Black. But they've got so much coming out now, it's really easy for things to just sort of disappear into the mist. If I was them, one of the things I would look, 2 things I would look at is, one, I agree, you're investing in a fast linear channel, something to keep people there once they watch those shows. And then also double down on their movies. They've done really well with the movies. They have, they were known for doing movies. The amount of movie content has dropped dramatically over the last year or so. And they've been doing these original movies. If they can use that and then start looking at making franchises, sort of the way that Disney does, where you have something that people go, oh, that's what Netflix is. So that's
oh, there you go. All right. So none of you mentioned advertising, interestingly enough. No. And in my particular role, if I was going to be running Netflix, I would immediately introduce a low-priced tier with ad support. That price has to be carefully calculated so we're not cannibalizing the mothership, because I think Netflix has plenty of subs. They just need more revenue per sub.
Rick, there's one other point I'd add in relation to this, because we've all been talking about the changing position in Netflix. In terms of consumer research, all the time when we hear stuff like this, there's a big study that we do every 6 months. We go out and we're hearing all our research through the year. The kind of the shine has gone off the Netflix brand a little bit for the reasons that Alan was talking about and others. But it's really interesting. We do this thing where we say, okay, if you had to get rid of a whole bunch of services, streaming services, one sort or another, it's kind of a last man standing exercise. Which ones are you most prepared to get rid of? Which ones are you least prepared to get rid of? Netflix holds hard across all generations, across the board. It's always really, really strong. I have to say YouTube is the other one. It's a sleeping giant people don't talk about in this context, right, because it's not a classically defined streaming service. But although some of the edge has gone off of the appeal of Netflix for the reasons that have been discussed, it's still incredibly solid in people's perception and the repertoire and their unwillingness to give it up. Of course, there's nothing to say that's not going to change. And that's the important thing about staying ahead of change happening to them and being the masters of their own destiny.
There you go. Okay, now one of the things that a couple of you mentioned was Netflix trying to be HBO, out HBOing HBO and all such as that, which then brings us to Disco, Warner, and HBO. And I would argue that I think since in the last few years, HBO itself hasn't been able to out HBO. But Colin, Dixon, what would you do if you ran? You can choose HBOMax specifically, or WarnerMedia, or take the step up to Disco Warner. And I just saw this morning, David Zaslav said that even though HBO currently has about 68 million subscribers through the traditional HBO and HBOMax, and Disco has about 18 million, Zaslav says we're going to do 200 million. He didn't say when they were going to do 200 million. Colin Dixon, if you were in charge of all of that, what would you do?
Gosh, if I were in charge of all of that, what would I do?
We would all start by saying, oh.
I tell you, HBO Max is a pretty good service now. There's plenty of content in there to make it interesting. I have never been a big HBO fan myself. I've always found the content a little bit too hard. But now HBO Max, there's a lot of content that draws me in there and has me using it. I was a little bit surprised at their approach at ads. They have taken the lowest ad load in the industry, and they've given a fairly substantial, I think it's a $5 price cut. I don't think they're going to make that up with the ad load that they've selected.
Right.
So I think what they need to do is, I hesitate to say increase the ad load, but be smarter with the ad load and take the Paramount Plus approach with, or rather, it's the Peacock, right? It's Peacock that's got 5 minutes and they're doing tremendous ad innovation. Love to see HBO Max do that. Copy that approach. I think that could be extremely helpful to them. I also think that there's some room for them to leverage linear inside of the app. Linear is a great way to just watch more casually, and that could give them more opportunities to increase ad loads without bothering people, because they're merely placing ads in gaps where ads were before. So I think I would probably do that as well. But I have to say, the strategy, let's remember, HBO was the first of the cable premium providers to make the leap to online delivery, and it has done exactly what they wanted it to do, which was to increase get HBO growing again. HBO had been pretty much stuck at about 30 million or 31 million subscribers in the US when they made that change. And there's no question now that all of the growth that they're claiming for HBO and HBO Max are coming from HBO Max. So let's step back a minute. That's a pretty remarkable achievement when they're the most expensive service in the market. So they've got something that people clearly want, clearly value a lot. So, I feel like I'm just diddling at the edges a little bit with the model. But that's what I would do. I would refine the advertising, the way they're going about the advertising, and be a bit more innovative.
Here's, before I'm going to go to Sherry next, but does anybody doubt whether the HBO numbers, when they say X number of HBO cable satellite subscribers and X number of HBO Max subscribers, are they double counting somebody like me, who is an HBO subscriber on DirecTV and an HBO Max user elsewhere? I'm sitting in two buckets. Are
Yes.
they counting me twice?
Yes.
Sherry? Yeah.
I
okay.
think they are. Yeah.
I think they are too. Sorry, guys. I tend to doubt the veracity of some of those numbers.
Well,
Sherry,
the thing is, if they're getting paid on both those units, it's fair enough, right? So
yeah. Sherry, what would you do? You're next.
Fault them. I would not go with the name that they are considering, at least not for anything that a consumer would see.
What a silly name. What a silly name.
You mean the Warner Brothers Discovery name, or okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'd be better off with Disco Bros, frankly, because at least it makes everybody laugh, right? And people remember it. But I don't think that would be a great name either. So, and I don't really get the content merger. I don't really get it. I guess
Me
I
neither.
think it makes sense from the standpoint that they need more inexpensive content to mix with their expensive content in order to have maybe a better margin at the end of the day. So maybe I can understand that thinking. Look, they're really smart people running that company, so I'm sure they know why they're doing it. I haven't really read anything that makes a whole lot of sense to me about the consumer proposition, and it really does come down to are they going to get more paying units because they combine these two entities? And I'm not sure how that adds up. 200 million is a nice number. It sounds great. I also looked for the timing component of that number and didn't find it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is going to sound mean, and I don't like this exercise really, Rick, that much, because I think it's so easy to poke holes in other people's strategies, and it is so hard to run a huge company like that. And these are all profitable enterprises, so they're obviously doing something right. They're all enterprises that have lots of consumers interested in them. So I don't mean this in the mean-spirited way that it might sound, but I would stop doing dumb things. Like, I feel like they misstep. Like when they launched HBOMax and the streaming and all that, there was so much customer confusion around that.
Yes.
Right? I'm in the industry and I didn't know what I had. I'm also paying twice for them. And I don't think most consumers feel good about paying twice for the same brand. So I think there are some like slow down and do it right kind of thing. I think the whole debacle with saying they're going to go direct to streaming with all their movies before they told any of the people making their movies about that was really wrongheaded and hurts them in the long run, because Hollywood talent, like it or not, some of those directors and actors, they have a lot of power. And so to blindside somebody who's already got a movie in the can with your studio and tell them they're not going to make their back end because you're not going to have a theatrical release, I mean, that kind of thing is just, that's nonsense, and they can't behave that way. So I know how hard it is to make the right decision. So I would just say maybe they got to slow down and not be making public facing decisions that aren't wise.
Okay. Alan Wolk. Now, aside from, I don't think it was you that said that, but someone said their name ought to be Disco Duck. I'm not quite sure.
That's funny.
Alan Wolk, what would you do if you ran any or all of that?
Well, I think that the biggest plus that Disco Duck has going for it is CNN, right? Because why do people continue to subscribe to pay TV? Because of news and sports. Now, sports is slowly making that migration over, but I think people feel kind of naked without having some access to CNN or MSNBC or Fox News if they're of that bent. But some sort of national news service, because what if there's an emergency and whatnot, and you can get your local news on apps now. And I think that is going to be a big thing to get people to actually start cutting the cord. And then they have this nice little bundle of Discovery, HBOMax, and CNN that they can start selling to people that meets a whole lot of needs. There's not a whole lot of overlap between Discovery and HBO. Discovery, well, I think is, I happen to agree with Zaslav that like it's often underrated by people because they have a lot of really popular shows. They've got a huge amount of genres, and most importantly, no one else does that. No one else has that kind of programming. And I always tell this story. My son is going to be 23 in October. When he was a baby and he would wake up in the middle of the night and I couldn't fall back to sleep, I used to watch House Hunters, and it wasn't a new show 23 years ago. So they own all of that. That's all theirs. And they've got so many series that are like that. I mean, the smartest thing that Zaz did was to buy scripts, because they got all of that too, which sort of fits in.
Right
And
there.
then, and then with HBO, I agree with everybody. They have to figure out what they're doing with that. They need to stop the nasties. First thing, they need to stop everybody sniping at Jason Kyler in the press, because that sort of turns everybody off, all of the sort of the production type people off from wanting to work with them. And they need to make it obvious to consumers what's going on, because even with the ad supported thing, they're like, well, HBO content won't have ads on it. Well, what's an HBO show? Like, how do you decide which of your new stuff is an HBO show and which isn't? And it's a tricky thing for them to do, because they need to sort of convince all those 30 million, 40 million people who subscribe to HBO for The Sopranos and Silicon Valley that, we're still making this kind of stuff, even though everybody else like Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and Peacock is making the same thing too, but yet we're also giving the Colin Dixons of the world stuff that's a little bit more accessible, but still really good. And, so if you didn't like HBO before, well, check out Max, because there might actually be something you like here. So I think they need to sort of, with all these guys, they need to figure out what they want to be when they grow up with HBOMax, and sort of, and get that across to people. And so that people who subscribe to them on cable, when they decide to cut the cord, say, oh, I can't do without this, I need to get HBO Max.
Okay, Mike Bloxham.
Well, I actually think that the coming together of Discovery and WarnerMedia is actually a really smart thing. And I also love that basically nobody was saying, oh, that's going to happen, and then it happened. So that appeals to me anyway. But you've got, one reason why it's a good thing, which is kind of secondary, is WarnerMedia is going to get run by people that know TV again and media, as opposed to AT&T. AT&T is a phenomenal company, and now it's going to benefit from getting back to the knitting, as it were. It's going to heavily invest in 5G, and that's going to be massive for everybody. But WarnerMedia is now back to being a pure play kind of media company, with everything that means these days. But looking at the brands, I mean, Alan, you just talked about Discovery and then now the Discovery Scripps combo. That is really the Netflix of unscripted in every single sense. No. It has the biggest, most successful portfolio of unscripted IP probably in the world. And that's the other point. Both Discovery as a portfolio and the HBO brand in particular are phenomenally strong international brands. And then add in Warner Brothers and the studio. I think they're kind of a sleeping giant in the way that the industry is looking at them right now, because there's going to get loads more growth in the US, but there's an inordinate amount of growth that they can pull out of international markets as well, and they're focused on that. And it's all in the execution. But if they get it right, I think that they're on a really, really strong trajectory to do incredibly well, because all of that IP that's there is complementary too. Because sure, WarnerMedia has some unscripted stuff in there, there's True TV and the networks and so on. But this suddenly pivots it, and they're kind of equally strong across both. The scripted from Warner Brothers and from all the networks and HBO, and the unscripted from the what is now the combined Discovery Scripps are phenomenally strong. So I think it was a really good move for both. And I think you're going to see innovation there as well. I think to Colin's point, we're going to see more innovation on the ad format side of things, so that we're looking at different kinds of inventory which are tailored for the streaming environment, as opposed to just saying, oh, let's look at what we did on linear and slap 30-second spots on everything, which are still going to happen within streaming. But if that's all we do as an industry, that really is a colossal failure of imagination. And I don't think it is all we're going to do, because a lot of companies are working on that. And I'm sure we'll see some of that out of the new combined Discovery Warner, whatever it ends up being called, which I think is probably not what it is right now. And it's such a secondary issue, it almost doesn't matter. I think the other question is going to be, would I look to merge both services or keep them separate? And I think right now that would have to be an open question, because both of them, the paint's not dried really. They're still very young, they're still forming, and all the implications and opportunities of the merger have still yet to become clear. But when you look across those portfolios, I think you see both connection points and you see kind of chasms where they don't connect. that's natural. But I think I would prioritize really understanding how those two portfolios meet and don't meet with different audiences. And that should be what informs whether or not you put any of them together or whether you keep them all completely apart. So I think that would be one of my priorities.
You probably do both, right? You have, like keep only Discovery is X dollars, Discovery and Warner combo is more.
Maybe, but there's already a lot of kind of squirreliness on the part of consumers about managing all of these different services, and the cry for give me a simple way of getting access to all the stuff I've got is getting louder and louder, which kind of sounds a bit like going back to the old formats as we've all talked about in the past.
Well, it does. And I think Alan's point about the linear side of things is very well taken. I hadn't really been thinking about that, but I think you're absolutely right there that there is tremendous value in pay TV subscriptions. And this creates a little bit more of a must-have portfolio for both sides of that house. And so I think that's smart and adds a lot of consumer value.
Yeah. By the way, there's one other really important point, and I think Jason Kilar is going to get vindicated by history in not only the decision to do day and date release streaming and theatrical, but actually even the way he did it. Because although it put a lot of noses out of joints, and to Sherry's point, very powerful noses, there's no way they'd have actually finished the negotiations on whether or not and how to do that now if he'd actually set about doing it what would appear to be the right way. Let's all talk about it, guys. Those negotiations would have gone on forever. It was clearly a act first, ask forgiveness later. And they've renegotiated. They've paid out hundreds of millions on back end deals and all the rest of it to keep the talent happy. So I think it was always going to be messy, but I think this was more efficiently messy. And I think they've repaired relationships to a significant degree.
So they ripped the Band-Aid off and now they're healing.
I think so, yeah. And that's no small achievement, actually, on the part of the organization. And it's not just Jason Kilar, it's the whole team there lent into actually.
Yeah, I put down a lot of the growth that they've seen over the last six to 9 months to those movies.
To Wonder Woman right there. Wonder Woman, I believe the calculation was a couple million new subscribers, and all of a sudden, bango, they hit what would have been a traditional box office. Alan's smiling about that. We went through those.
And it's a totally different way of then evaluating sales off the back of a movie. It's not one ticket at the movies.
Right.
Or at least a percentage of those people that sign up to watch it, they'll stick with the service for a number of months.
Revenue per subscriber that came in. By the way, you know what? We have run through every bit of our initial 45 minutes, and we haven't hit anywhere close to our list. I will add one thing on the Disco Warner. If I ran that, I would take the next meeting with John Malone, because he changed his stock in Discovery when this was all done. And the next acquisition of Discovery doesn't have John Malone on the board. He did that on purpose. There was no accident on that. I think there's another shoe that will drop, and I think those two will go somewhere else before they actually close. But that's just my opinion of it.
Any thoughts on
who?
Yeah.
Comcast. Comcast has got the money. They've got the aggregation capability. That's my side. Viacom CBS is too small for anything, right? I'm sorry, guys, I own stock in them. They're too small. All right, you know what? We have some companies we wanted to talk about, and I'm going to ask each of you to comment, if you want to, on either DisneyPlus, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Roku, or Comcast. And let's give just one short pithy comment on either Disney Plus, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Comcast, or Roku. And I'll go down to you, Colin. Which one do you want to pick? Because I think we're going to come back and do this again. But which one
I think so too. I'll take Peacock. I got 4 things they should do. Number 1, integrate all the Zumo channels that Comcast owns. That'd be a great addition. They should go all in on all sports. They're already doing really well. They're shutting down NBC Sports Network at the end of this year. Really go in on sports. That's a big differentiator. They need to beef up their news. And again, they should just copy CBS, All Access, Paramount Plus, and what they're doing there. Get the locals in there. That'll be a big bonus. And the 4th thing is do a better job with the Winter Olympics games than they've done with the Summer Games. It's a mess in there. I couldn't find anything. And I was really upset that I upgraded my subscription because there wasn't anything additional to make it worth it.
All right, Alan, you actually had people complaining to you about the Peacock Sports, but
Yeah,
of those four companies.
Yeah, they say, Colin, at least you upgraded, because a lot of people I know thought they had Peacock because they had signed up for free Peacock, which was a smart idea at first because they didn't have anything. There was no reason to, they had nothing to charge people for. But then they didn't tell anybody, because when people signed up for free Peacock, they didn't say, oh, and by the way, there's a pay version of this if you want. So most people assumed it was just another fast. And then suddenly they get there to go and try and watch the Olympics. And then like, oh, wait, you have the wrong one. You need to pay for it. And like, what? This is a pay service? When did that happen? And if they had just done a better job, to your point about the Winter Olympics, if they just done a better job of telling people like, okay, this is the deal. And look what you get for it, because it is a good deal. And if they had just sort of laid that out there instead of assuming people would like not care, then they would have been in a much better place and avoided a whole lot of bad publicity.
There you go. Michael, you want to make a final comment on any of the companies we haven't talked about yet?
Sure. I mean, I think DisneyPlus, I guess, but it applies to Peacock as well. Building off what Alan said, lean into news. Sort out news in the streaming space. There's huge potential. We know the power of news as a way of attracting eyeballs and getting habitual usage of a medium. Both of them have really strong news assets and legacies. And I know everybody's thinking about it and looking at it in major ways. But I think that's something one needs to accelerate and get ahead of it before it happens from elsewhere, in the same way we started to see Amazon jumping into sport and getting a chunk of the NFL. The other thing I would say to Disney is keep doing what you're doing, because the way they're leveraging what is probably the biggest, most comprehensive content library with Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, all the Disney stuff. I mean, just leverage the IP. I think Loki was a great example of taking a piece of IP and turning it into a different format with the series that probably wouldn't exist without Disney Plus, for example. Yeah. And when pandemic allows better, I say cross-organizational integration, parks, cruises, theatrical, everything. They've been kind of shackled on leveraging that for promoting it and creating experiences which link back to the streaming service. But I think that is an asset that they're sitting on, which would also benefit both ways, the streaming service and the parks business.
Cool, man. Sherry, final comment. Which of those companies do you want to politely, apparently, talk about?
Well, I want to echo the disappointment in how hard it was to find what I wanted to watch on the Olympics this year. I don't know if that was NBCU's fault or if it was my cable operator's fault or what, but it was a mess. My VOD didn't work. There were categories with no content in them and no indication of when content would be there. And it was just a big mess. And so I was very disappointed in that. And I would hope it is handled better. And the other thing I guess really this would apply to any platform that wants to include advertising in their monetization plan. I think we are missing the boat as an industry in the opportunity we have to use internet technology to deliver more interesting advertising in the form, in particular, an idea that I think could be really valuable and accepted by consumers, more importantly, is what I like to think of as sequential advertising. So since we know through the internet technology that we have, what people have been watching, we could be delivering long form story versions of advertisements chunked up into 15 to 30-second pieces so that we tell a whole story, we bring a consumer along through a brand so they don't get the ad fatigue that they now get from seeing the exact same ad too many times in a row. And they get to know a brand or a product better through the use of technology. I think we're missing the boat not doing that. And I hope that's what happens in the next year.
I love that image of a consumer looking at an ad and thinking, my God, what's going to happen next? Right? As opposed to
the smart TV OEMs are particularly well positioned for that because they can see what you're watching on linear and on streaming.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, well, everybody, you know what? That was phenomenal to our audience. This will also be available on demand. We have some questions we'll try to answer. I might try to go through the video of this after we're done and pick up some of the comments and try to put them into some social media. But thank you all very much. Mike Bloxham, Alan Wolk, Sherry, Brennan, Colin, Dixon. It's been great fun. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rick, for putting this together.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, to our host at WIP Media, we are done. Everybody out there, just be nice to each other.